If you'd told me that an ordinary weekday with my grandson, just spending the day at my place while his parents were at work, would change how I saw him forever, I would have smiled and brushed it off. I thought I knew Michael. I thought I knew every line in his face, every meaning behind his smile. But that day, when he leaned in close and breathed a few quiet words into my ear, my whole body went cold. Not from fear, not from anger, but from a kind of heartbreak tangled with love that I still don't quite know how to name. Before I get into what happened, let me ask you something. You, watching right now, what city are you in? Tell me below. I always picture your faces scattered across the map. New York, Dallas, Chicago, some tiny town no one's heard of. And somehow that makes telling this easier. So, let me start properly. My name is Olivia. I'm 75 years old, and I live in a calm little neighborhood where most days, the noisiest thing is the mail truck or the neighbor's mower. My husband, may God rest him, died 7 years ago, and from that day on, the house has felt a bit too big, a bit too quiet, and far too full of memories. That morning began like any other. I woke up well before sunrise because at my age your body sets its own alarm and doesn't care when you went to bed. I made my coffee the usual way. 2 sugars, a splash of milk, and stood at the kitchen window, watching the light slowly drive the darkness out of the yard. Around 8, my daughter called. "Mom, can Michael stay with you today?" she asked. I could hear the rush hour noise behind her. That busy hum of engines and people. We both have shifts all day, and he doesn't have class until tomorrow. Of course, I said. You never have to ask. Michael is my only grandson, the lone boy in a long line of women. My daughter, his mother, likes to say that's why I spoil him endlessly. Maybe she's right. But once you've lived as long as I have, you learn that love is one of the few things you're better off giving in excess, not in small measures. He arrived about 40 minutes later, knocking once and then coming in like he always does. "Hey, Grandma," he said, his voice deeper than I still expect. Every time he speaks, I still hear the little boy who used to dash around my living room with jam on his cheeks. Now he's grown. Broad shoulders, dark hair that always looks like he's just run his fingers through it. Thoughtful eyes that seem a bit older than his years. His backpack was slung over one shoulder, phone in hand, like most young people these days. "You're too skinny," I told him, as I always do. "Come on, sit down." Heat smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. That was the first thing that made me pause. Michael had always been easy to read. When he was happy, it shone. When he was sad, it showed. But that morning something in him felt pulled back, like he was standing behind his own face. "I already ate," he said, dropping his bag by the couch. "But I'll take some coffee if you've got any." "Do I have coffee?" I scoffed. "What kind of house do you think this is?" He laughed, a soft, polite sound that people use when they're being kind more than amused. I noticed, but I let it pass for the moment. I poured him a mug from the pot into my old brown cup, the one with the chip along the rim I refused to throw out, and handed it over. We settled at the kitchen table. Morning light slipped through the curtains, painting everything in warm gold. The wall clock ticked its steady rhythm, counting off the seconds of my life like beads on a rosary. "So," I said, "how's school, how's life?" He took a slow sip, staring at the tabletop before answering. "It's fine," he said. "Fine. If you've lived long enough, you learn that fine is a dangerous word. Sometimes it means okay. More often, it means, I don't want to talk about it." I watched him. His jaw was clenched. His shoulders sat a little too high. His leg bounced beneath the table like a motor that wouldn't shut off. "You know," I said calmly, "I've known you since the minute you entered this world. I know your fine voice." "That one, wasn't it?" He glanced up, and for a heartbeat, his eyes softened. "I'm just tired," he said. "That's all." "Then today's perfect," I replied. "You'll rest. We'll chat or we won't. Whatever you feel like." He looked like he was about to say something right then. His lips parted, his gaze flicked toward me and then away, but the words never made it out. Instead, he nodded, finished his coffee, and drifted into the living room. The day moved on quietly at first. I folded laundry while he lounged on the couch, thumb scrolling over his phone. Now and then he'd show me a funny clip, and I'd pretend to understand more than I actually did. Other times, I'd catch him staring into space, thumb hovering above the screen, not really scrolling at all, just thinking. Around noon, I fixed us grilled cheese and tomato soup, the same lunch I used to make when he was 10 and came over after school. He smiled when he saw the bowls and plates. "You still do it exactly the same," he said. "If it works, why change it?" I answered. We ate in front of the TV, some documentary muted while we talked. Our conversation stayed in the shallows, classes, the weather, the new neighbors. Any time I tried to guide it into deeper water, he gently steered it back to small talk. But I could feel it. That something pressing against him from the inside, like he was wearing an invisible heavy pack. While I was rinsing the dishes, I heard a sound behind me. A small, shaky breath. I turned my head just enough to see his reflection in the kitchen window. He sat at the table, rubbing his hands together the way people do when they're chilled or nervous. Except the house was warm. "Michael," I said, turning fully to face him. "Talk to me." He blinked like I'd pulled him out of somewhere far away. "I'm talking," he said lightly. "No," I replied. "You're talking air around something. That's not the same." Our eyes met, and that's when I saw it clearly. The storm gathering behind his calm expression. It sat there, like a dark cloud waiting to break. He looked away first. "Maybe later," he murmured. "All right," I said quietly. "I'll still be here later. And now, whenever you're ready." People like me, at my age, are often accused of talking too much. We give advice no one asked for. We repeat old stories. We fill the air with words. But if you really love someone, you learn that sometimes the kindest thing you can do is let the silence stay and allow them to decide what to put into it. The afternoon settled softly around us. He helped me water the potted plants on the porch. We sat side by side, listening to distant traffic. The neighbor's dog, another mower starting down the block. Ordinary sounds that usually mean nothing. That day, they felt like a gentle soundtrack under something heavier. "Ranma," he said suddenly, his tone quieter. "Yes, sweetheart. Do you ever," he paused, "do you ever feel like you're in the way?" The question caught me off guard. "In the way of what?" I asked. "Just in the way," he said. "Taking up space you don't deserve. Making things harder just by being there." My heart tightened. "No," I said. "I've felt lonely. I've felt forgotten. I felt a lot of things in my time." I shook my head. "But in the way? No, not really. Why?" He gave a shrug, the hopeless kind, like his shoulders were already used to carrying something he couldn't put down. "No reason," he muttered. "But there is always a reason for a question like that." The hours slipped by. We made a simple dinner together, roast chicken, potatoes, a little salad. I watched him move around my kitchen, reaching for dishes, opening the wrong drawer and laughing at himself. On the surface, it could have been any other visit. But that feeling, that heaviness, tailed us from room to room. After we finished eating, we cleared the table and left the dishes soaking. I turned on the small lamp in the living room, the one with the warm yellow shade, and the house sank into that cozy evening glow that makes everything appear softer. "Come sit," I said, patting the cushion beside me. "Let's rest these old bones." He sat down a bit closer than usual, not pressed in against me, but not far either. I could feel his warmth, even across that slight gap. We stayed that way for a while, wrapped in a half-silence that didn't feel awkward. The TV murmured, but neither of us was truly watching. I could hear his breathing, steady but a little too controlled, and occasionally I'd sense him shift, like he was gathering courage. At last, he spoke. "Grandma?" he said softly. "Yes." "If I tell you something, will you promise not to get mad?" I turned toward him and really looked. His eyes were glossy, his jaw clenched again as if he were holding the words back with his teeth. "I can't promise I won't feel anything," I said truthfully. "But I promise I'll listen, and I won't turn away from you. Whatever it is." He swallowed. "I don't really have anyone else I can say this to," he whispered. That single sentence already hurt. The thought that this boy, this young man, felt that alone with a family around him cut deeper than he realized. "You have me?" I said gently. "Go on." He stared at his hands, then at me, then leaned the tiniest bit closer, like he was afraid the walls might be listening. His voice dropped until it was almost pure breath. "I heard Mom and Dad talking," he said. "They don't think I know. They were in the kitchen the other night, arguing after they thought I'd gone to bed." My heart started beating harder, slow and heavy. "What were they arguing about?" I asked, barely above a whisper. His eyes filled, but this time he didn't look away. He said. "They were arguing about me." The room suddenly seemed smaller. The warm lamplight, the ticking clock, the low TV noise. Everything drew in tight around us. "What did they say?" My voice came out as soft as his. He took a shaky breath, then leaned in so close I could feel the warmth of his words against my cheek. When he finally whispered them, they slipped into my ear like a knife cushioned in velvet. "They said I was a mistake, Grandma," he breathed. "They said if it weren't for me, They'd both be living completely different lives. Happier lives. They were fighting about who gets stuck with me if they finally split up. For a moment, everything inside me went utterly still. The sounds in the house, the clock, the TV, even our breathing, faded to nothing. All I could hear were his words echoing, "A mistake, stuck with me." I stared at him, frozen in place, my fingers digging into the upholstery without me realizing it. It felt like someone had opened a window in midwinter and let the cold pour straight into my bones. He watched me then, really watched, waiting to see what I would do with the truth he'd just entrusted to me. All I knew in that instant was this: nothing about our ordinary day was ordinary anymore, and whatever I said next would stay with him for the rest of his life. Before I go on, I need to tell you something. The next part of this story is heavier, deeper, and far more emotional than I was ready for when it happened. If what you've heard so far felt like the air right before a storm, then what came next was the lightning finally hitting the ground. Even now, retelling it, I can feel the warmth of that living room lamp, the weight of Michael's confession hanging between us, and the way my own heart seemed to swell and crack at the same time. When he told me what he'd overheard, those sharp, thoughtless words spoken by the very people who should have cherished him most, I felt something inside me wrench. It wasn't anger in the loud, shouting sense. It was quieter, deeper, the kind of fury a mother or grandmother feels when someone wounds a child she loves, the kind that settles in your bones and stays. He sat there watching me, eyes fixed on mine, searching for something. Reassurance, comfort, or maybe just proof that I wouldn't recoil from him. I couldn't. "Michael," I said softly, my voice roughening. "Come here." He hesitated for a heartbeat, like he wasn't sure he deserved to move closer. Then he slid along the couch until there was no space left between us. I laid my hand on his back, slow and careful, feeling how tense he was. Every muscle seemed pulled tight, as if he was waiting to be hit with something worse. "No one," I whispered. "No one who truly loves you would ever call you a mistake." His breath stuttered, and he ducked his head. I could feel the heat pouring off him, the rise and fall of his chest too fast and uneven. "They're my parents," he said, sounding almost stunned by it himself. I shouldn't be surprised. They've been distant for a long time. They fight all the time. They barely even look at each other. But actually hearing them say it out loud, like my being alive ruined everything for them. His voice broke. It broke something in me. And I shut my eyes for a second to steady myself. I remembered being young, overhearing adults say things they didn't think little ears would catch. Those phrases stay. Even decades later, they smolder low inside you. "Look at me," I said softly. He lifted his head, and when our eyes met, I saw something inside him give way a little. Not in weakness, but the way a person does when they finally stop pretending they're fine. "You didn't break anything," I told him. "They did. They broke the promise they made the day you were born. The promise every parent makes without saying it. To love their child without conditions." His throat worked. "And you?" he asked, his voice barely there. Do you think of me that way too?" It felt like a blow straight to my chest. "Never," I said. "Never once. You have been one of the greatest gifts of my life. You made this house loud again. You made it warm again. You gave me something to look forward to on days that felt gray. You've been a blessing from the very first time I held you." A tear slid down his cheek, and he wiped at it quickly, embarrassed. "I'm too old to be crying on your couch," he muttered. I smiled a little. "You're never too old to cry on the shoulder of someone who loves you. Believe me, 75 years has taught me that." And he let out a small, shaky laugh, and I felt some of the tension in him begin to ease, but only a little. Hurt like his doesn't disappear. It lingers like a bruise under the skin. We stayed there in quiet for a while, not just as grandmother and grandson, but as two people sharing a truth that couldn't be ignored. At one point, he leaned back, his shoulder resting lightly against mine. There was real comfort in that small contact. A simple, familiar closeness that needs no explanation. He wasn't a child anymore, but he was still a Michael. And in that moment, I became the one person he could finally be completely honest with. After some time, he spoke again. "Grandma," he said slowly, "sometimes I feel like I'm floating. Like I'm watching my life from the outside. Like everything is heavy, like I'm walking through water." The words cut at me. I laid my hand over his, feeling the faint shake there. "That's not something you should be left to carry alone," I said. "I know," he whispered. I don't know who to say it to. I don't want to be a burden." "That's not a burden," I told him. You're not a burden. You're a person whose voice matters." He exhaled, and his fingers curled slightly under mine like he needed the contact. Not desperately, but like an anchor, something to keep him from slipping too far into the dark place those thoughts came from. The room fell quiet again. Outside, the wind picked up and brushed against the windows. The lamp cast gentle shadows across the walls, and for a while, the world shrank down to just the two of us, side by side, trying to untangle his hurt. "Do you think," he asked, eyes on the floor, "that people can really start over, even if they've already messed things up?" "You haven't messed things up," I answered. "You're young, you're learning. Life isn't meant to feel easy at your age, and the mistakes your parents made," I paused, "those are not yours to carry." He blew out a long breath. "I just wish they wanted me," he murmured. "They do," I said, "but wanting someone and truly valuing them are two very different things. Their failures don't set your worth." He leaned his head back against the couch, closing his eyes. For the first time since he'd walked through my door that morning, he looked like he might finally be able to breathe. "Can I stay a bit longer?" he asked quietly. "You can stay as long as you like," I told him. "You always have a place here." He shifted closer again, not pressing in, not reaching for anything that felt wrong, just needing nearness. Needing to know that at least one person in the world saw him and cared about him without any strings attached. I let him rest his head against my shoulder, just like he did when he was small and worn out from playing in the yard. Only now he was grown and solid, his warmth a reminder of how quickly time moves. We stayed there for a long time, my hand resting lightly on his arm, his breathing evening out as the weight he'd been holding alone slowly loosened, piece by piece. Eventually, he spoke once more, his voice low and unguarded. "I didn't know who else to tell," he whispered. "I didn't think anyone would care as much as you." I swallowed, feeling the sting behind my eyes. "You don't have to earn my care," I said. "You already have it." He nodded, and I could almost feel it. The moment his heart finally allowed someone else to carry even a small part of the pain he'd been keeping locked inside for months. It was the kind of moment that quietly changes a relationship forever. It wasn't dramatic or loud. It wasn't some big confession scene out of one of those romance books my late husband used to tease me about. It was softer, human, real. A boy stepping into manhood. A grandmother realizing that her last great purpose in life wasn't behind her, but sitting right beside her, trusting her with the most fragile parts of himself. As the night deepened and the shadows stretched longer across the floor, he whispered one more thing, this time not with fear, but with a fragile kind of hope. "Grandma, can you just stay with me a little longer?" I gave his hand a gentle squeeze. "I'm right here," I said.